Thank you. So today we're going to talk about right speech. Moving on in our series of discussing the factors of the Noble Eightfold Path. And I'm going to share my screen. It's going to take me a second here. Because these are my notes for today, and I think it's useful for you to see them, because the Buddha said so much about speech that it's really helpful to take a look at the basic things that you've probably heard many times, and maybe we'll have a few things that he talked about in a couple of places that might be new to you. In any case, let's all come to it with a fresh mind and see what we might do to apply this to what's been happening in our life currently. So at first I want to start with the 4 aspects of right speech. And I want to make the simple distinction between right speech and the precept of not lying. So in the 5 precepts, the precept on speech, in our tradition, usually we translate it as, I will abstain from false and harmful speech, something like that. And it doesn't really say harmful speech in Pali. In the Pali version, it just talks about not lying. It just talks about not saying things that are false. And really what that means, a lie is actually something you know you're doing. It's not a mistake. It's not even a kind of unconscious exaggeration. It's really, the Buddha said, you know you're going to lie, you lie, and you know you lied. I mean, this is a lie. You're trying to deceive someone. So the precept is that way. But then when the Buddha talks about right speech, speech as part of the cultivation of the Noble Eightfold Path, which is leading to complete liberation from suffering, of course, there's a lot more detail. And speech is such a, excuse me, speech is such an interesting and very available action, and it really has a lot of impact. So he gives these 4 components to what is right speech. The first one is to abandon false speech. So you speak what's true, adhere to the truth, then a person is trustworthy and reliable. You're one who's not a deceiver of the world. And we've probably all run into deceivers of the world, whether they intend to or not. I mean, they intend to, but they don't often realize the negative results of that. So we want to also think in terms of what are the karmic results, what are the really automatic results of lying. Well, people don't trust us. We don't feel internally clean and free from worry. The second one is abandoning malicious speech. So, or sometimes it's called divisive speech. And you can see by the sort of the definition here that you can see it's about dividing people. That you don't like tell what you heard somewhere in order to kind of separate people from each other. You don't try to create trouble between people. Instead, you try to reunite people who are divided, and you promote friendship, enjoy enjoy it when people are getting along well together and rejoicing in that, and speaking words that promote that kind of connection and ease between people. And the third one is to abandon harsh speech. So we want to say things in a way that's gentle, pleasing to the ear, lovable as go to the heart, are courteous, desired by many, and agreeable to many. Now we're going to get into all kinds of ways in which sometimes it's not going to be that way, because we have to say something for good reasons that people aren't going to like, but we can try to say it in a way that doesn't have an edge on it that's unnecessary and unhelpful, and may well shut people down. And the fourth one is to abandon gossip and frivolous speech. So it says here, when to do that, one knows you don't gossip, one knows to speak at the right time, to speak what is fact, to speak on what's good, to speak the Dhamma and the discipline, and at the right time speak such words as are worth recording, reasonable, moderate, and beneficial. Any questions or comments? No? All makes sense, huh? Oops, sorry. Little, did someone want to say something? Lynn? Okay, I saw Jules' hand first, and then I'll go to Neil.
Okay,
Jules?
thank you. I just wanted to say that I was very glad that you specified what is considered lying, that you actually know that you're lying, because a lot of times with the information we're given at the time, we think we're speaking the truth, and then we later learn that it wasn't. But I guess that's also a warning that we need to be more discerning about what we accept as true, and not jump to conclusions too quickly.
Absolutely. And we're going to, the Buddha talks about that. We're going to touch on that a little bit more later too. Neil?
Well, actually, I was just going to kind of make a joke, but it might be worth saying anyway. I was going to say under gossip, it says one speaks what is fact. And sometimes, of course, gossip is fact. But I think you might want to comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, we all kind of know what gossip is, I think, talking about people, spreading things around that really has no benefit. It's, and again and again, as we look at these things that Buddha talks about with regard to speech, we should look at what it does to our sense of self and how our ego gets involved. And, maybe there's a little feeling of, I want to be the one to tell this juicy story or something, and it's really unwholesome. It doesn't really feel that great when you think about it. Lisa, did you want to say something, or do you want to just?
Well, I was going to, but then I thought, do I really need to say this? It just strikes me that
Practicing right speech on the spot. I love it.
the last category is kind of includes some elements from the first three, or I mean, gossip is a kind of malicious speech, or what is fact is not speaking false speech. The last one seems kind of like a hodgepodge to me, although
yeah,
good reminders.
And this is just one of the places. This is coming from the Majjhima Nikaya 27. This is part of a much bigger teaching, and he is probably just kind of wrapping up the speech part there. He talks about right speech in many other places, and it doesn't always have these words there, but talking about, and in other places I don't have it here, but there are other ways that he talks about frivolous speech. So frivolous speech can just be kind of nonsense kind of speech. And the thing to look out for with this is, what are we evoking in someone else's mind? This is a very important thing to consider when we consider what we say. If we're stirring up greed, hatred, or delusion, we should be very, very careful not to do that. Really kind of reflect on, what does this bring about in someone else's mind? Is this just distracting them from what would be better to reflect upon? Or this is the kind of thing with frivolous speech. And a lot of humor falls into this category, and it's really a joy to experience people who have really good beneficial humor, but it's not easy to find. A lot of times humor can be divisive, or it can be in this way very frivolous, stirring up defilements. So it's really useful to think about that. Tim?
I want to describe something that I'm kind of going through now, that sometimes right speech can take the form of, I think I really have a clear understanding or know the history of something, and then I find out, I'm telling people, oh, I think this is the way it is, but it's absolutely not the case. In this case, it's something very nuanced. It's understanding the Pali Canon, the Tipitaka. How did it actually evolve? How was it written down? How was it recorded? And I had all these strange ideas about the different languages that it was recorded in, and it turned out I was just like 100% completely wrong. I didn't actually know the evolution of it from 2,500 years ago, that these different languages, Gandhari and Sanskrit, and then when Pali, it hit me between the eyes this week that the Pali language is sort of the alphabet of the Pali language that they created to record it. It doesn't look anything like what I thought it was. It's almost like it's a language that, I'd say just the written form of it, that it came out of use in the 7th century AD, or Christian era, and it looked completely alien to me. I'd never seen it before, and it's like I thought I kind of understood the history of the development of it, but I was completely and totally wrong. And the interesting thing, though, is you can look all this stuff up in Wikipedia, and I looked up Pali and I went, wow, I've never seen that before. It's truly bizarre, like the Gandhari language. And I looked that up, and it's like, these are ancient alien alphabets. And
So like really just thinking, your point is really good. I mean, a lot of times first of all, we believe what people tell us, especially if it's a teacher or somebody, and we think we know, and maybe we don't. And we will get, the talk might be a little bit longer today than usual, and because there's so many good things to look at in this, and that's one of them. That how do we really know what we're saying is true? And we don't want to get too kind of obsessed by it, but we should consider, that maybe maybe there's a lot there that we don't know. And even if we've been around a long time, and some of the stories that get passed around in the Dhamma world are wrong. They're not really what the Buddha said, or they're not really from the Buddha's time, or, it's just like, it's really helpful to dig a little bit into what's really, what we think has been the earliest record. And so this is good to know. And it's not, it's like I said, I don't feel like we need to get super obsessed with it, but to at least hold open the not sure part of everything. Ajahn Chah talked about this so much, this not sure. And this is another of many ways that we can apply it. I think this is the way it is. And also, like, depending, and of course, as I get older, it gets even clearer, depending on our memory is pretty precarious, I think. So we want to be careful to not like put a stake in the ground around how we think it is sometimes.
Yes, I am guilty of that. Putting a stake in the ground when
I wasn't trying to point out anyone's guilt.
Yeah. Right. Thank you, Ayya.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. It's a good point. Regina?
I was going to point out the last little bit of the second paragraph. Thus they are one who reunites those who are divided, promoter of friendships who enjoy concord, rejoices in concord, delights in concord, a speaker of words that promote concord. And sort of my experience that I felt like I was subjected to people who probably acted with the understanding that they were doing something like that, but really didn't allow for differences. And that really did not feel very good. And so that passage just jumped out to me more than others, because it's really difficult to allow people to have their differences. And it gets very interesting to allow people to really have their differences. They can be all over the board, and then still look for friendship and for getting along, and that there can be a community with all of our differences. And so that's what I'm striving for. So thanks for letting me share.
Yeah, it's very valuable to look for where we have common ground. And sometimes we find that more easily when we talk one-on-one, because we can really, hear each other. And then we can maybe like open our arms to the rest of the group. Anyway, just some thoughts. Okay, I'm going to go on here to sometimes what's called 5 courses of right speech, or 5 courses of speech. And here I'm just referring to it as 5 ways of speaking, or this is in the simile of the saw, which you've probably heard of before. And it's Majjhima Nikaya number 21. So I think all the references here are from the Majjhima Nikaya, the middle length discourses today. So it says, when people talk to you, their speech could be timely or untimely. So we've all had people approach us and talk to us about something, and it was really not the right time for us. We've all experienced being on the other side of that too, bringing something up when it's really not the right time for someone. They cannot hear it. And so there's that being timely. So when others talk to you, their speech might be true or untrue. Their speech might be gentle or harsh. Their speech might be connected with good or with harm. So it might be wanting to be beneficial or have a good purpose, or it might be from a not good purpose. The speech might be spoken with a mind of loving kindness or with a mind with inner hatred. And so the Buddha goes through talking about this quite a bit in this sutta. That the part he says, so regardless of what people are saying to us, we can train ourselves in this way. Our minds will remain unaffected. We shall utter no evil words. We shall abide compassionate for their welfare with a mind of loving kindness, without inner hate. We shall abide pervading that person with a mind imbued with loving kindness, and starting with them, we shall abide pervading the all-encompassing world with a mind imbued with loving kindness, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. This is how you should train. So you can tell the bar is a bit high, but it gets even higher when he says, if you encounter bandits with a two-handled saw and they start sawing off your arms and legs and a thought of hatred arises in your mind, you're not following my teachings. So, sometimes teachers say things that are a bit graphic and extreme to get you to remember it. And then after he says that, he says to these monks, or probably like monks, nuns, and lay people there, who knows? He says, so if that's true, then what could you ever get upset about that someone would say to you? So it is quite a training. And it also has the key of how we can check our own speech. Am I saying what is true? Do I have a good purpose behind it? Can I say it in a way that's gentle? Is my mind set in loving kindness, or am I saying this from being ticked off about something or whatever? And am I doing it at the right time? The timeliness thing is a really sensitive, I find, like sometimes you want to say something to someone, especially in community life. You want to say something to someone and you've got a 20-second window, and if you miss it, you may not get another chance for a long time. And it just is that way, and it's better to wait most of the time. Sometimes, of course, we can create the right time by asking someone if we can talk about something and then setting a time that you're both prepared for. Obviously, things that are really pleasant, maybe it's easier, the timing isn't so sensitive, but it's those harder things, we want to really pay attention to that aspect. Any comments or questions on this part? Yes, Neil?
So I was curious about the use of the word unaffected. And so I looked it up just now because it sounded, like it could be interpreted to mean could be interpreted to mean many things. And I noticed there are two definitions: feeling or showing no effects or change, which I'm not sure is what's intended, but then I see it means without artificiality or insincerity. And that feels a little more appropriate here, I guess. I just thought I'd mention that.
Yeah, it's interesting because, we're always working with a translation, and I think that I don't know what the Pali is there, and I'm not going to look it up right now, but it's interesting sometimes to go back to the Pali. So if you wanted to get on Sutta Central and look for this and then use Bhante Sujato's translation, he'll have the Pali right there with it, and you can just click on it and see, because I think I have seen this passage translated a bit differently. And my sense is that it means when someone's talking to me and they're saying something, like it can rev you up one way or another. And if your mind remains unaffected, it's because you're not letting their anger or the greed or the confusion come in and change your mind. Your mind is balanced, equanimous, attentive, and not altered by what they're saying. And that's what I think is meant there. And there's this beautiful story that I think I've shared with you before about this lay woman. She's one of the 2 lay women that the Buddha held up as the best example for any lay woman to try to follow. And forgive me for the gender stuff, but this person is the one who had a son who was falsely accused and convicted and then executed. And she said in that whole time her mind didn't change. Her meditation was incredibly deep and her mind was incredibly stable. And even though she loved her son very much, her mind was stable the whole time. It didn't go into, all the things that we could imagine ourselves, our own mind going into in a case like that. And so I think what the Buddha is saying is we train ourselves that our mind is a bit separate from whatever's coming in. And even if feeling is arising in the body or in, a feeling is arising, there's that aspect of the mind that is observing that. This is the same kind of practice for like preparing to die, or preparing for if we have an illness that really is debilitating. The Buddha wanted us to train so that our mind is not ill, our mind is not afflicted, that we have that separation and we can observe what's happening, be present with it, be compassionate in that moment still. So that's what I think it's about. Thank you, Neil. Paula?
Hey, I wonder if you wouldn't mind if I mentioned a book that I'm currently reading about communication. So this is the name of the book, Say What You Mean, A Mindful Approach to Nonviolent Communication by Oren J. Sofer. And there's actually a course.
I hear Oren's doing really good work with
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and I'm in a course, and Joyce and I hope she doesn't mind if I mention her, are taking this course now. We're buddies. So now it's out there, I'm saying it. Sorry, Joyce, if I hope that may have been wrong speech. Actually, I should have asked permission.
Out of the recording.
Anyway, I just want to say that what you just mentioned about how you have to come from this place of understanding and mind. Yeah, you didn't really say mindfulness, but of like metta towards the other person. It's exactly what Oren is talking about in his book, and he says that there's 3 foundations: lead with presence, come from curiosity and care, and focus on what matters. And I have found this personally really helpful because of the enormous amount of conditioning that we have in our upbringing to talk the way we were sort of raised. We end up getting into these grooves of communication, and I've read Right Speech, I've looked at the suttas, but I needed tools to change my behavior. And so practicing weekly with a partner, it's a sort of a nonviolent communication. Probably people have heard about that from Marshall Rosenberg. I just felt like I'm finally working on that. And I just wanted to mention it in case anybody else was interested, and just to say what a deep impact it's making on me. And like it, to me, right speech is like the one precept I can, that I'm trying to like really work on, because I don't feel like some of the other ones I need to work on as much. You know, I don't kill, I don't, you know, there's other ones I don't. So I think that this is the one that we can make the most difference in our lives as well, in terms of world peace. And like what you said about, you have to, when someone is throwing things at you, his technique is like, okay, be present, ground yourself, take deep breaths, realize that that person that's talking to you, you care about, you really want to connect to, and, you know, then think about what you want to say. And he has all these tools in here. So I hope that's useful, and I hope it was appropriate.
Yeah, yeah, totally appropriate. And first of all, I completely support nonviolent communication. And before that actually started, I guess, or maybe around the same time, I was learning a similar system and practicing it called parent effectiveness training. And it had this similar kind of model for communication. And what I found was exactly what you said, Paula. It's you get the tools, but you also really need the practice. Because even though it seems simple when you read about it, if we don't practice, it is so difficult to do, especially if you want to, you know, use a way of talking about something difficult. If you want to say something to someone, it's really takes some practice to do that in a way that isn't threatening. And I'm not going to claim that I'm doing it right all the time either, because you quickly pick up other habits or go back to other habits, or in a lot of cases, you don't really need to think about it that hard because it's not so charged. But to be able to practice and really be able to work in this way is great. It's great to do that with a partner in a group. And when we don't have that, you know, are we really going to do it? So thank you. That's great. Really good. And I really appreciated the things that you said about how the speech precept for many people, my mother used to say this, that's the hardest one. And it's because we're talking so much, and there are so many different contexts and so many different ways to express ourselves. And, you know, it's like, that is tough. Once you've, you know, stopped killing things, and you've maybe, you know, like really gotten meticulous about not taking anything, and, you know, you get it. It's hard and it's important. So thank you. And Nicholas?
Yeah, I just want to say that I really find really helpful all of these different type of, you know, doing something harmful with your speech. So like I had this experience like just a few days ago with a family member, and he was like very angry at me because he was expecting me to think in a certain way. And yeah, so he's sort of like he's a person who gets angry quite easily when one doesn't do what he wants. And I start to remember like these sutras in which the Buddha actually gives you tools how to react to such situations. And I think like for a long time I have been like really busy probably reading or like very theoretical. for I felt like that was probably the best moment to apply something, because I think like I've never really done it before. Like I sort of knew, but never really put it into practice. And then I just remember like in the sutras, it said that when like someone sort of like says harsh words to you, you should like trying to apply compassion and trying to apply loving kindness, trying to apply sort of like trying to think about good things about that person. And there are other sutras that sort of said like, okay, if this person is like really bad with his mind, also with his thoughts, and think about what he's good with his speech. Or if this person is really bad with his speech, think about what's good about his actions. So sort of like think about something good that you remember from that person. And when that doesn't work, then you should try to focus your mind in something else, sort of like to ignore the situation. When if that doesn't work, I think you should trying to question yourself. Why are you feeling this way? Why sort of like questioning your mental formations, I think. And yeah, so I sort of tried to apply all these things, and it's really helped me to not like sort of fight back. So I didn't raise my voice. Like in the past, I would just like raise my voice, just like the other person would have been done to me. But this time, I was able to remain calm, and I was able not to raise the voice, because I was my mind was sort of like busy thinking anything good that he has done to me in the past. And that was just very powerful, I think. As a so I think like it's very useful, like about Buddhism, that it's not just like, okay, don't do that, but also like, okay, here are a set of instructions that you can use, and if you apply them, it's going to bring you happiness, or it's going to help you to deal with this world, sort of thing. And I would say as well that sometimes when we hear people who has said to us like really harsh things, or something that is not really nice, we usually start thinking, okay, this person is terrible, this person is evil, oh, he said bad things, I can't stand that person, I don't want to hear about this person anymore. Oh, I just remember how this person did that to me, another bad thing to me in the past. And that's precisely the opposite, because we sort of like trying to reinforce the negative thoughts, and then we just get anger, and then we just get angry and angry and angrier, and it's just it's bad for our health. And then when we get really angry, then we might retaliate and say something back, and then a fight would start and all of this. And yeah, it's sort of helpful, like when we use right intention. So we have the right intention of thinking that we should cultivate this good thought, and then the right effort that we should actually, even when we think that we want justice, or that we want keep thinking about these negative thoughts, trying to force ourselves to think these positive thoughts. And the more you think about them, the more naturally they become. And then you sort of like in a better position to sort of deal with these situations. And it was like the first time that I actually thought about this sort of teaching while this was happening. And yeah, it was just really interesting how we can use these situations as the way to practice. It's like I think I heard once from a monk something like, these difficult people sometimes are like our masters. So this angry person teaches patience and loving kindness. It's like the perfect moment to actually apply what we've been taught. And yeah, that was just like really amazing how we can actually use these tools that Buddha gave us to sort of like subdue our anger, our hatred, and to avoid violence and other type of conflicts.
I'm so happy for you. I'm feeling a lot of mudita. I mean, it's great. Just kind of hearing you talk about how it felt in that moment to remain calm And, just, I mean, I'm kind of like relating to how I've felt that way myself, and how, like you said, it's powerful. And the feeling that you get when you're able to stay calm like that, it's really, I'm very glad. And your description of how the Buddha taught, and the fact that he gave us these practical methods, and how applying them changes your life for the better. It's really great, Nicholas. Thank you.
Thank
Joyce
you.
put her hand down, so maybe we'll wait till later. Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so let's continue. So this is an interaction the Buddha had with this prince named Abhaya. And Prince Abhaya was being, he was encouraged by another teacher who was kind of trying to compete with the Buddha, to try to trip the Buddha up and get him to say something that is wrong, but the Buddha didn't. And it was around speech. And this is what the Buddha said around what a Tathagata says. And this is useful for us because we can apply the same kinds of things. He says that such speech as the Tathagata knows to be untrue, so he knows it to be untrue, actually false or not substantive is another way, and unbeneficial, which is also unwelcome and disagreeable to people, that he wouldn't say that. Yeah, you're like, no kidding. If it's not true, and it's not, it doesn't have substance, and it's not beneficial, and no one wants to hear it, I don't think any of us are gonna, we're gonna try to avoid saying that. But then when he knows it to be true, and it does have substance, but it's still unbeneficial, and it's unwelcome and disagreeable, he doesn't say that. If he knows something to be true and it has substance and it is beneficial, but it's unwelcome and disagreeable, he knows the right time to say it. So you don't just avoid saying something because people don't want to hear it. It really is, but using the right time. If the Tathagata knows that something's untrue, false, and unbeneficial, but is welcome and agreeable to others, he does not say it. So don't say things that are untrue or unbeneficial just because people are going to like it. And that cuts out all kind of, untrue flattery and, whatnot. It's just trying to get something. No. The Tathagata if there's something that he knows to be true and substantive, but unbeneficial, but is still welcome and agreeable to others, he doesn't utter it. So even if it's true, even if it has substance, if it's not going to help, don't do it. If it's not beneficial, don't do it. So the Tathagata knows what is true, correct, and beneficial, which is welcome and agreeable to others. He still knows the right time to say it. So notice that things have to be true, substantive, or correct, and beneficial. And then whether people want to hear it or not, that's not the important part. You got to know the right time to say it. So I kind of left this example the way it was written, which is an example of how reading the suttas can be kind of trying. And you have to pay attention to like what just changed from one example to the next and why. And so even piecing it out and reasoning it out can help us think more about what it really means. And then when it, at the bottom, it says, and why is that? Why does the Buddha say what's true, substantive, and beneficial, whether people want to hear it or not, and saying it at the right time? Because he has compassion for beings. That's why. Any comments or questions about this piece? Yes, Lisa.
It's, I think it does really highlight it, kind of, as you said, how complex our verbal interactions are, and how tricky it can be to check in on all these different aspects of whether we should actually speak or not. Yeah, but it's very interesting just to look at how convoluted it is. For myself, I also studied with Oren J. Sofer that Paula mentioned, and he gave us just a kind of a stressing the four positive aspects of right or wise speech: truthful, helpful, kind, and timely. And that's what I always come back to in a situation when I can be flustered or really confused about my speech: truthful, helpful, kind, and timely. Just to check in on those, because it's difficult.
Yep, it is difficult. Yeah, thank you. Helen?
Hi, folks. Thank you, Ayya. This is rich and important, so thank you. I'd be interested if you have any thoughts, Ayya, on if one is engaging in verbalizing something to somebody, and then kind of somewhere in the middle of it, one recognizes, oh, this isn't something, this doesn't, if one hasn't checked all of it before, or checked some of it and then realized, oh, okay, the intention behind this, no, like if one is in the middle of it, I find this challenging, that I can think something is going to be right or well, and then become aware, no, either because I wasn't completely truthful with myself, or because I became aware that something that I assumed about the other person, that they were ready or that they were wanting or open, became untrue. And then how to stop, like how to stop that train, or, but more to the point for me more often is how to then socially back out or stop without saying, okay, well, obviously you're not ready for this, which is not something I would ever say, but there's just, you see what I'm saying? That's the complexity. So any instruction you have on that, or any thoughts, I would be grateful for those.
Yeah, thank you, Helen. First of all, I'll say that before we get to the example you just had there, that question at the end, I find that stopping, if I find myself saying something that isn't coming quite out right, or when I say it, I realize that it's not quite true, a bit exaggerated or something else, to stop and say, no, wait a minute, that's not really quite right. Let me go back and say that in a different way. That has been really effective. And in general, people find that really encouraging. They trust you more because they can see that you're in the moment trying to purify your speech. And I think that maybe this does help with the example you're asking about, because if we're in the middle of trying to explain something or talk about something, and it would be by its nature, by the nature of your description, it would be something a bit challenging or difficult in some way, or we realize that it's becoming challenging and difficult. I think it's okay to stop, and you're right, not to put it on the other person, but to, even to realize that this also requires some more clarity within me, to be able to say, I'm not as clear about this as I'd like to be. I'm gonna revisit this first on my own, something like that. And of course, it depends a lot on the context and the relationship and all of that. But I think that, oftentimes we're given the training or the kind of unspoken or maybe even spoken rule that we should always look like we're put together, that we always should look like we've got the answer, that we should be able to, pull together a clean front, some kind that, that is on top of stuff. And that's really not very realistic for human beings. And a lot of times when we move through life thinking that we have to have this kind of unshakable facade, it's not really genuine. And I think sometimes the more genuine we are, I think most of the time, the more genuine we are, the more people feel comfortable and supportive of that. And so I would just, just try it. Yeah, thank you, Helen. Memo?
Thank you, Ayya. Let me see if I can elaborate on this. Sometimes, I'm sometimes pretty shy, and I don't know if it fits in right speech, but in this speech, the Tathagata is giving, he's speaking about when to utter or not utter something, right? When to say or not say something. But sometimes it even happens that we might go like, oh, this is not the right time to say it. And then you save it and you never say what you wanted to say. So not saying something can be considered wrong speech also?
No, not really. I mean, unless you're asked a question and not saying something leads people in to believe something that's not true. I think we could kind of conjure up some kind of example where that might be the case, but in general, no. And having said that, we're all human beings. We have opportunities to say things that are encouraging, that are caring. And if we don't take those opportunities, it's a sad kind of missed chance. So I do think that there are times when we want to think about, why am I saying this? Am I going to say this for someone's benefit? If it's going to benefit them, then I can probably do it, even if I feel a little self-conscious about it. And like I said, when we're talking about things that are beneficial and not difficult, not challenging, not hard for people to hear, I think it's easier to find the right time. It's easier to just drop that in the middle of other things, like don't hesitate to tell people you love them. Don't hesitate to tell people that you're sorry. There are things that we want to make sure we've said in case we don't ever see them again. And so that's one way that I would think about that. But in terms of, right speech, I mean, the positive side where the Buddha says at the right time, say things that are worth recording. say things. I mean, that always seems like kind of a high bar, you know. It's like, gosh, what do I have to say that's worth recording? You know, we might say, but actually, if we're thinking about the benefit of others, we can find quite a few things that are worth them, you know, worth saying that they might remember. Thank you, sister. Never hesitate to say thank you.
Thank you, Ayya.
You're welcome. Okay, so let's go on. We've got, I think, one more reference, and it is an important one. It's where the Buddha talks about the preservation of truth and the discovery of truth, and I think it's ultimate arrival at truth. The arrival of truth. So this is a very useful sutta that I recommend you looking at. It's number 95 in the Middle Length Discourses. It's called With Chanki. That was a Brahmin who doesn't really play a very big role in the sutta at all. And I won't go into the sutta. I love it, and we could spend the rest of the morning on it for, you know, if I am not careful. But the point here is about how to preserve truth. And this is a very important thing now. Someone told me that, I think this was actually something Andy encountered at school. People are actually talking about our era as the post-truth era. This is a really frightening label. And we want to make sure that we don't participate in making that one a reality. And so we want to know how we stand with whatever we're saying. And this comes from this young man telling the Buddha that his tradition, which was a Brahminical tradition, they have their hymns, their scriptures, and they say this is true and everything else is wrong. And the Buddha questions him about this, and it comes to the conclusion that he has faith in this, but he doesn't really know this for sure because he hasn't really directly experienced this, the validity of these sayings. And so the Buddha says, if you have faith, then the way to preserve truth is to not say this is the truth, but to say my faith is this. It says that my faith is that this is the way it is. And you don't come to a definite conclusion that only this is true and everything else is wrong. If a person approves of something, you know, I approve of this, it doesn't mean that it's absolutely the truth, because maybe I can't tell, I don't know. I agree with this. You can say, I agree with this. Or the Buddha said, if you receive it through oral tradition, this is what the tradition is. If they reach a conclusion based on, you know, intellectual analysis, here it says reasoned cogitation, which isn't usually the normal language I use, but, you know, intellectual analysis, then I can say, according to what I can figure out, this is what I think is true. That would be a preservation of truth. And he goes on to, you're accepting a view, you know, and then in all of these cases, if we can't actually drill down to the source and see it for ourselves, we can say it in a way that we can preserve the truth and not settle 100% on the conclusion that this is true and in every other perspective is wrong. So in our times, we've got a lot of varying views about things. And as Regina was saying earlier, we can, you know, do a lot to hold them. And part of the way to do that is to really really look at, what do I really know about this for sure? And then, it's fine to have our opinions, but we need to look at how tightly am I clinging to them? And what does that do to my sense of self, my ego, or my feeling of safety? And just really being clear and precise around what is it that we really know about this for sure. I can say I read it somewhere. I could say, I've interacted with people who think this way, and it's had an influence on the way I'm thinking. There's a lot of ways we can identify like why we're coming to the conclusions we've come to. And when we do, we're preserving truth. We're really saying it in a way that isn't something anyone can refute. It's like, I'm still open to hear like what someone else has to say coming from a different set of experiences. And so it's just like, I think this is brilliant. The Buddha he's not telling this young man, yeah, your whole thing is wrong and this is why, it's like, no, it's like, yeah, if that's where your faith is, then say that. But then he says at the end, this is preservation of truth, but it's yet not the discovery of truth. So what is the discovery of truth? And of course, the Buddha is talking about the Dharma. He's talking about the way life is, the way things are. That's the beneficial thing he's concerned with, not really what this king is doing or that king is doing, or whatever. He's talking about like what's really the truth in terms of the way things work. And what he tells this young man is really helpful, because he gives him, like Nicholas was saying, the Buddha gives methods. He gives, like, this is how you go about it. How do you discover the truth of the way things actually are? Well, you find someone, he says, a mendicant living supported by a town or a village. And then the householder is, anyone who's not in the monastic life, basically. And they go and they learn from this person, and they really scrutinize them. They really look at, greed. Anything that arouses greed provokes hatred or promotes delusion. Does this person have any qualities that would do that would arouse greed? Does this person have the qualities such that their mind might be overwhelmed by greed, that they might say they know something when they don't, or that they don't know or they might say that they know something that they don't, or they even say they see it for themselves, but they haven't really, or they might encourage others to do what is for their harm and suffering. And so to really look. So this is, a lot of times people say, I want a teacher. How do I choose a teacher? This is what you do. You really test it out. You really watch them and listen to them. And then are they free of those kinds of states? Not that they never experience greed, but that the greed isn't obsessing their mind in a way that they would lead somebody the wrong way. And also seeing that what they're teaching is really deep, hard to see, hard to understand, peaceful, sublime, not just logic, not just, intellectual. And then you do the same thing based on hatred and delusion, really, really investigating the person, getting to know them well. And when you scrutinize someone in this way, and you see that they're really solid, then you can put faith in them. And then you spend time with them and you learn from them. You really listen to them. You remember what they say. You reflect on the meaning of what they say. And you accept those meanings after you really consider them. And when this happens, excuse me, enthusiasm springs up and in the person, and you make an effort, you persevere, and then you directly realize truth for yourself, and you see it with penetrating wisdom. That's how the awakening to truth is defined, or the discovery of truth is defined. But then he says, this is still not the final arrival at truth. And how do you do that? And he says, it's by doing the same thing over and over again. The cultivation, development, and making much of these same things. That's how you arrive at truth. That's how it becomes solid in your understanding and your knowing, depth of knowing. That there's no way that you know for sure there isn't anything false about it. You're really clear. Any comments or questions on this one? And it's not the last one, is it? I've got one more. We might not meditate together today. Oops, sorry, moving that around. Anybody want to say anything about that one? Yeah, Neil.
Yeah, it occurred to me the phrase beyond the scope of logic could be troubling to our age, but the way you said it was a little more helpful, I think. You said it as not just about logic. And so I just wanted to point that out, that was helpful.
Yeah, thank you. Let's see what else I've got on this page. Oh, I added this just before we started today. The exposition of non-conflict. This is important too for our ability to talk about things. And he's giving this, the Buddha is teaching this to the monastics as they are teaching. And he wants them to know, when you're teaching, don't, praise one person and disparage another person. He said you should know what it means to extol or what it is to disparage. Extol, like praising or saying this is the way, this is the right thing, or saying, this person here, they're doing the wrong thing. And you should neither extol nor disparage, but should teach only the Dhamma. And we can think about this in our own life. He describes this later on in the sutta. This is just the list at the beginning. And when he describes this, he says, if you say, yeah, all of you who kill living beings, you're lost. And you who avoid killing living beings, you're on the right track. He said, don't say it that way. Just talk about the Dhamma. The results of killing living beings is that, there's difficult karma, or whatever you want to say, whatever is true about that. But to say it in a way that doesn't tear somebody down, or, even build somebody up in a way that's just like setting this kind of distinction and people into different groups. So we've been, human beings are constantly putting people in two different groups. And the Buddha, of course, did a lot of that. There are two kinds of people, but not when you're talking to people, not when you're working with real people. You can think about the categories, but that's different. Okay. When talking with people, he's saying you should know how to define pleasure, and knowing that one should pursue pleasure within oneself. Now, what's that got to do with speech? what the Buddha is talking about here is not taking pleasure in worldly, unstable things, but building up spiritual pleasure in meditation. And that puts us in a mental condition that makes it possible to both remain steady when other people are saying things that we find hard to listen to, or things are happening that are difficult. And so this is part of the useful training in order to be able to have right speech. One should not utter covert speech, so behind, like private or sharp speech, except at the right time when it's true, substantive, and beneficial. So it's back to kind of a previous list there. So, don't have a secret agenda, but sometimes you have to talk to people in private about things that are true and have substance and are beneficial. And sometimes you might even have to say something sharp. Sometimes people just aren't gonna pick it up otherwise, especially if you're in a teacher-student relationship. But this is one of the things that's very important to remember in our speech. Do we have the invitation to say this? When people come here or you get online and come to something we're presenting, then that's an invitation to hear what I have to say. But if the neighbor drops by and they're talking about something going on in their life, I don't have the invitation to say anything about that. I have to wait to be asked, or if I think I've got something really true, beneficial, and so on, I can ask if they want to hear something, maybe. But you get the idea that having that permission to say something is really important. Speak unhurriedly, not hurriedly, and don't insist on it being in your local language, in your language. Use the language that's normal wherever you are. Okay, that's the last of it. And any comments or thoughts about this whole thing, or anything about what you're experiencing in real life that we might, as a group, apply some of these teachings from the Buddha to? Yes, Karen.
As is often the case, it's very timely that I showed up today because I'm having some issues with right speech. It occurred yesterday, and it's something that occurs regularly at work. But first of all, I just wanted to thank Nicholas. He was very insightful and really got me thinking. And also just wanted to say that I really am focusing in on the earlier portion about the timeliness of saying things. I'm somewhat new. I found Buddhism, I guess, during the beginning of the pandemic. So I don't speak up very often in sessions like this because I don't feel like I have a lot to provide. So that also spoke to me today. But I think that the timing for me is it's all a big issue, but that's a particularly big issue for me. And yesterday I found myself taking a time out and deciding that it wasn't the right time to say something that others might not find to be beneficial, so unwelcome, even though I think it is objectively beneficial to the organization. And it made me realize that I became less angry because when I slowed it down, I haven't addressed it yet. It'll be addressed next week, I believe. But it had so much, talking about it, hearing others talk about it today, it just really made me understand a little bit better today how slowing it down helps me as much as, or maybe even more than it helps them, because it makes it less, I love that word sharp, makes it less sharp. So again, just thank you for holding this today. And I'm so glad I stumbled in.
Yeah, we're glad you joined us. I'm glad it's useful. I mean, I have no doubt about the Buddhist teachings being useful. We just have to do it. Yeah. Thank you, Karen. Jules?
Hi, thank you for this teaching. It's really wonderful. And I just wanted to share what I have as a problem with right speech is being upset and being, or just my emotional state is affecting my tone of voice and how I'm feeling about the person that I'm trying to talk to. So I feel in order to practice right speech, I have to bring my energy level down all the time. I have to be aware of it and just be thinking, like being aware, okay, I feel a little heightened now. I got to bring my energy down. Or even if I'm feeling like, you know, upbeat and I'm getting a little silly, and then I might get a little flip with what I say. So even when I feel like I'm a little too happy in a giddy kind of way, I got to bring the energy down, because if I don't, I'm really in danger of saying something that can be offensive to people and makes me feel bad too.
Yeah, thank you. No, I once someone that I knew was working over the phone as a social services person, and her job, excuse me, and her job was to talk to people with disabilities and try to get them the services that they needed. And, you know, sometimes that's, you know, maybe some kind of material things that are helpful to them for whatever they're needing, or some kind of you know, kind of person, people to provide services, whatever. But anyway, she said that, you know, she loved her job. She loved being able to talk with people and help them. But she said she noticed that when she would be talking to someone who was hard of hearing over the phone, and she had to shout so that they could hear her, she would come off that phone call feeling angry, upset. And she knew she wasn't angry about the person. She wasn't angry about the situation. She's used to helping people with disabilities. You know, it's not like, but she was just realizing that it was having to raise her voice triggered this inside. And, you know, it's like, this is very, what you're saying about energy is so important. And it's like, it doesn't even always, it doesn't necessarily come from anything that's happening in the context. It doesn't necessarily have anything to do with this other person. When it does have something to do with the other person, we have to even be more careful, you know, like, why is this impression or this thing getting triggered? And it could be anything. It could be something from a past life. It could be something from something that just gets, you know, like connected in our mind with a previous memory. So important to do what you said and to really tune into ourselves. And I remember Ajahn Sumedho talking about this when he was starting Chithurst Monastery in England. And the story, which I'm sure I heard at a public talk, so I know he wouldn't mind my sharing it, was that there was this older lady who was helping get the monastery going, and sometimes he found interacting with her and working with her pretty frustrating. And she was saying something or whatever, and he yelled at her. And then he caught himself and he like thought, oh my gosh, I'm yelling at an old lady. I was like, and he said that really was the triggering event for him to look at him inside at what was coming up as people are talking to him. So he said, this is mindfulness in stereo. He didn't say it that way, but it's mindfulness in stereo. You're mindful of what they're saying. You're mindful of what's going on with them. And you also have to be mindful of what's going on inside. And that mindfulness keeps you a bit distanced from both. And so what's going on inside can be held and be managed, and maybe afterwards you have to go away somewhere and kind of work that through, which is great, which is the right thing to do. And also being present with the person in front of you. So we have one of the things I love about the Buddhist teachings is it feels like there are always new horizons. We can always look to, oh, there's more I can learn. There's more I can do. There's more skill to develop. It's not just watch your breath at the tip of your nose until you die. There's more. Not to say that's a bad thing. Anyway, that was a jam-packed class in a way, and that's not our usual style for Karen, who just came for the first time. Usually we meditate together for half an hour. The talks are around 20 minutes. But right speech has so many gems from the Buddhist teachings with these different facets. So I appreciate your patience, all of you. And I hope you meditate on your own today, and take good care of yourselves. Tomorrow we're going to have our katina. It's going to be from 1:30 to 3:30 or 4. I know the Zoom room will open at 1 o'clock, and you can check in and chat with people maybe. And we'll have the bhikkhunis from Aloka Vihara with us, and we'll have monks from Abhayagiri join online, and Bhante Jayasara will be with us too. And yeah, it's going to be a festive day, and we can, just appreciate all the good things that have happened all year coming up until this time. Yes, Joyce, go ahead.
Since there was so much interaction today, I just want to check if there's anybody who shared who does not want their share included on the recording, which will be posted to YouTube. I think it's a very rich discussion, and I hope no one says no, but if you do, please say your name.
No pressure, but you had a lot of good things to say.
That right speech or wrong speech? Oh dear.
I think that was pretty right.
Not anybody say anything, so.
It looks to me like everybody's okay with that discussion going
Okay, great.
online. And we do hear from people how helpful these things are. So
Yeah.
I know that, we all are looking for support. And when we can find other people talking about the things that are happening for us, we can get a handle on how we might address them in a more skillful way. So thank you, everyone, for all your sharing. And I think I'm just going to chant a little blessing for you. You want to help? May you have every good blessing. May all the devas protect you. By the power of all the Buddhas, may you ever be well. May you have every good blessing. May all the devas protect you. By the power of all the Dhamma, may you ever be well. May you have every good blessing. May all the devas protect you. By the power of all the Sangha, May you ever be well. Right, friends. Thank you so much.